Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, April 26th, 2026, and thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about the last 8 days of Ohio State football, which include the spring game and another hugely successful NFL draft for the program. Let's start with the NFL draft, which concluded yesterday. Now, for the second year in a row, Ohio State led all programs in draft picks with 11. That included 4 in the first round. In a mild surprise, receiver Carnell Tate was the first Buckeye off the board at number 4 to Tennessee. Edge Arvell Reese went number 5 to the New York Giants. Linebacker Sonny Styles went number 7 to Washington. And the Buckeyes just missed making history when safety Caleb Downs fell just outside the top 10 to number 11 to Dallas. Had Downs been drafted 1 pick earlier, it would have been the first time in NFL draft history that 4 players from the same program were taken in the top 10. Now on day 2, defensive tackle Cade McDonald, tight end Max Clare, and cornerback Davison Igbinosun were all drafted in the second round. McDonald was taken at number 36 by Houston. Clare was picked number 61 to the LA Rams, and Davison Igbinosun went right after Clare at pick number 62 to Buffalo. Will Kazmarek was the last Buckeye taken on day 2, and that was in the third round, pick number 87 to Miami. Finally, yesterday, defensive back Lorenzo Styles Jr. went in the 5th round to New Orleans. Defensive end Caden Curry went in the 6th round to Indianapolis. And finally, offensive tackle, and a bit of a surprise, Ethan Onyanwa went in the 7th round to Atlanta. Ohio State's 25 picks over the last 2 NFL drafts ties the 2-year NFL record set by Georgia from 2022 to 2023. Now, 23 of those 25 players drafted were a part of Ohio State's 2024 national championship team, which included 8 first-round picks and 5 second-round picks. Wow. And mind you, those totals do not include Jeremiah Smith, who is a surefire first-rounder in next year's draft. And I think it's a decent bet that players like Kenyatta Jackson and Austin Sarabald, who also played key roles on that 2024 championship team, could be drafted in the first 2 rounds of next year's NFL draft as well. For Buckeye fans, look, the NFL draft is both a time to celebrate and to reflect. I mean, we celebrate what is a huge lifetime achievement for each of these Buckeyes and their families, and we reflect on their accomplishments during their times in Columbus. You know, a lot of wins, a lot to celebrate. But it's also fair to reflect on what they didn't accomplish and why. I also think the NFL draft is the epilogue of any Ohio State team. It provides closure and resolves any lingering questions we might have had about a team or a recruiting class or even an individual player. In the case of the 2024 Buckeyes, almost all the data is now in, and I think it's safe to write the epilogue for that team now. That Buckeye team, to its credit, delivered on the ultimate goal, as we know. It will forever be remembered as a champion. At the same time, given the sheer volume of NFL talent on that roster, failing to deliver a win over Michigan and a Big Ten championship that season, I think we can also say that, oddly, the 2024 Buckeyes underachieved. And when we write the epilogue of the 2025 Buckeyes, with 4 players that would be taken with the first 11 picks and Jeremiah Smith, but could only manage 10 points in the Big Ten championship game loss to Indiana and 14 in a quarterfinal loss to the 10 seed, I think underachievement will be a big theme there as well. Our friend Doug Maurice wrote on his Substack this morning about the historic talent acquisition happening in Columbus under Ryan Day right now. Since 2020, Doug says the level of NFL talent that has come through Columbus has been on par with the best the game has ever seen. Now, I don't want to steal Doug's thunder. Go ahead and pay the nominal fee to subscribe to his Substack and just read the whole piece. But one thing from that piece really stood out to me, and I think Doug would be okay with me sharing here, which is this. Since 2020, Ohio State has averaged more first-round NFL draft picks and more overall draft picks than the peak Miami Hurricanes, which won 3 titles from 1987 to 1993, and Nick Saban's peak Bama teams, which won 4 titles between 2010 and 2016. So since 2020, Ryan Day has been stacking more first-round picks and more overall draft picks than peak Miami and peak Bama under Saban, but only has one national title over that span. Now, it's unfair to call that a failure on Day's part. I mean, he took the reins from a legend in Urban Meyer who had taken recruiting in Columbus to unprecedented levels, and not only has Day upheld that standard, he's exceeded it. But as Doug put it on his Substack today, it's a missed opportunity that Day has only managed to win one national championship since 2020, despite historic levels of talent acquisition. Now, I think I'd use a different word, and I mentioned it earlier, underachievement. That's the word that I would use, because over that same span, since 2020, Day has fallen short on other goals that are very important to Ohio State fans, which are beating Michigan and winning Big Ten championships. And the reality is, look, those aren't easy goals to attain, but they are more attainable goals than a national championship. And since 2020, Day has only one win over Michigan and one Big Ten title, despite historic levels of NFL talent coming through the program over that span. And that Big Ten title happened in the COVID-shortened 2020 season, in which the Buckeyes only needed 6 games to win the Big Ten. Now, look, I don't think it makes you a card-carrying member of the lunatic fringe to expect a little more from the program, assuming the talent acquisition run that it's on continues. And why wouldn't it, right? So that was my big takeaway from the last few days from the NFL draft. It was great to see all those Buckeyes and their families have their moments in Pittsburgh. And there's no better advertisement for the program than seeing 4 Buckeyes go in the first 11 picks. And at the same time, it's reasonable to wonder why there hasn't been more success at the highest level, given all of that talent. Last Saturday, the Buckeyes had their spring game, and of course, I have a few thoughts from that I'd like to share. Unsurprisingly, the defense beat the offense 35-26 on a rainy afternoon in front of 40,240 fans. Now, I think that was the paid attendance. It looked like about half that number actually showed up for the scrimmage. So first, you never want to draw too many conclusions from an intra-squad scrimmage. I mean, we've seen our fair share of spring MVPs completely disappear when the Buckeyes start playing real games in the fall. I mean, look no further than Mylan Graham in last year's spring game as evidence of that. And I think that rule is especially applicable when your starting left tackle and right tackle and top 4 running backs are all unavailable. Left tackle Austin Sarabeld, right tackle Phillip Daniels, running backs Bo Jackson and Isaiah West all sat out the spring game after having minor offseason procedures. Freshman running back legend Bay, who'd been generating a ton of buzz this spring, also sat that game out. Josh Padilla, who's in the mix to start at right guard, did not play either. And on defense, projected starting safety Earl Little Jr., the Florida State transfer, and second-year linebacker Riley Pettijohn were also out with minor injuries. So, look, what we saw on the field on Saturday, I think, is going to be very, very different from what we're going to see on September 5th against Ball State, especially at running back and on the offensive line. There was just really no way to accurately assess those two positions last Saturday with that many players out. Now, having said all that, I do think when a true freshman who's only been on campus a few months can stand out in a spring game, that's something to pay attention to. And that's what we saw from receiver Chris Henry Jr. in this scrimmage. 4 catches for 96 yards receiving and a touchdown. Now, earlier in the spring, Henry Jr.'s classmate Brock Boyd had been getting all the buzz at receiver. We didn't see much from Boyd on Saturday, only 2 catches for 21 yards. But Henry Jr., to me, looked as good as advertised. Now, he's been playing as Jeremiah Smith's backup all spring. But after what we watched on Saturday, I think it's absolutely incumbent on the coaching staff to get him on the field with Smith this fall. I never understood why the OSU beat had gone out of its way to tamp down expectations of Henry Jr. when he got to Columbus. He is so obviously ready to play right now, and there's a clear path to playing time for him. I mean, who's going to keep him off the field? Kyle Parker? No disrespect to Parker, but look, he's 5'11" with 34 career receptions. I don't see a player like Parker keeping Chris Henry Jr. off the field. You know, I said it on our last pod. I thought Henry Jr. was the obvious candidate to emerge as wide receiver 2 this season, and nothing I saw on Saturday made me think otherwise. Now, a lot of fans were hyperventilating over the play of sophomore quarterback Tavian St. Clair last Saturday. St. Clair finished with a game-high 166 yards passing and the game's only touchdown pass. Most of that passing yardage was to Chris Henry Jr. And I will admit, the upside is exciting. At 6'4", 235 pounds, St. Clair, he's an absolute unit. He's big, he's athletic, he's got a howitzer for an arm, and he had half a dozen plays on Saturday that should have Ohio State fans very excited about his future. But he was also only 9 of 21 on his throws. And at least 2 of those throws should have been intercepted, but they were dropped. He also airmailed a throw that should have gone for an easy red zone touchdown in the second half. I think that was to Devin McEwen. Look, there's good reason to be excited about St. Clair, and his day will come, but I think he still has a very long way to go. Anybody that is talking about a quarterback controversy, I think you're totally off base. And personally, I like what I saw in limited action from Julian Sayin last Saturday. Sayin finished 8 of 15 for 82 yards. Now, he did have a pass that was deflected by Will Smith Jr. and intercepted by Bo Atkinson at the line of scrimmage. But look, Sayin had to face the first-team defense without his starting left and right tackles. He only had Jeremiah Smith for 1 series, and I don't believe he got any snaps with Chris Henry Jr. either. But he did rip several throws to Smith that looked great. He had one to tight end Nate Roberts that looked awesome. I think it was his best throw of the day. I think it went for like 20 yards. He also had 2 timely scrambles, one that went for a 4-yard touchdown run and another for a first down. The fans wanted to see more willingness to run from Sayin when the situation, of course, calls for it. And I thought, both of those scrambles were a sign of really good progress. To me, Sayin looked bigger and stronger in the pocket in this game than he did last season. Look, I saw just about everything I needed to see from Julian Sayin on Saturday. He's going to have a monster 2026 season. I would not be worrying about quarterback if you're an Ohio State fan coming out of this game. Finally, I thought the Ohio State secondary, especially cornerback, looked great on Saturday. Devin Sanchez, to me, looks ready to make that leap from promising 5-star prospect to star player this season. And Dominic Kelly, the Georgia transfer, looks like an absolute steal. Kelly is going to play a ton as the third corner this season. Like Sanchez, Kelly's big and physical, and his emergence allows Jermaine Matthews Jr. now to move into the slot on passing downs where I think he's much more naturally suited to play. I mean, that is where Matthews Jr. is at his best, is in the slot. I also liked what I saw from cornerback Cam Calhoun, who nearly had a pick on Tavian St. Clair in the spring game. Calhoun, he's an interesting player. He's a journeyman who started his career at Michigan in 2023. He transferred to Utah in 2024, where he had his best season, before transferring again to Alabama last year, where he only played 51 snaps. I think he might have been injured at Bama last season. But in 395 snaps at Utah in 2024, Calhoun was great. He finished with an overall PFF grade and coverage grade of 82.8. He also graded out really well against the run and in tackling with grades of over 70 in those areas. So I love the depth of talent Ohio State has at cornerback. I mean, they're big, they're physical, they've got some good experience with players like Jermaine Matthews Jr. and Calhoun, and the young guys, Sanchez and Kelly, have all the upside in the world. Now, I've already talked about the promise of the Ohio State safeties in previous pods. You've got Jalen McClain coming back off of an excellent sophomore season. And then you have the addition of the 2 transfers, Terry Moore from Duke and Earl Little Jr. from FSU. Moore and Little were both all ACC players at Duke and FSU, and there has been a lot of buzz around both players during the spring. I think Ohio State is going to have the best, most versatile secondary in the country this season. And that's a bold statement, I know, when you consider that unit just lost 3 starters to the NFL in Caleb Downs, Davis Igbenogson, and Lorenzo Styles Jr. But it's clearly the strength of this defense in 2026, and I think the versatility of that unit is going to give Matt Patricia a lot of pieces to move around the chessboard this season. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Look, we have a long off season ahead of us. We are still 132 days away from Ohio State's season opener against Ball State. But of course, I can always find something to talk about when it comes to Ohio State football, even when there are no games being played. So look for another pod from me in the coming weeks. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.